Woohoo!
Good morning. The Unitarian Church of Montpelier is located on Western Abenaki land, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among indigenous peoples. The Unitarian Church of Montpelier honors, recognizes, and respects these peoples as the traditional and ongoing stewards of the lands and waters on which we gather. In that same spirit, we will respect, protect, and be good stewards of this land for as long as we walk upon it. My name is Steve Finner, and as today's worship associate, I extend to you a warm welcome. Reverend Joan is out sick today and unable to be with us for worship. It's not COVID. Ministerial intern Vertus LeVar Robinson is filling in. Thank you for joining us in this time of worship from wherever you are, whether you are on Zoom, on Facebook, or watching the service on your own time. We deeply appreciate your presence and your fellowship. The Unitarian Church of Montpelier is a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1864. We are a religious community that welcomes all as we journey together, speaking spiritual wholeness and justice in the world. Whether you are a newcomer, a longtime member, or somewhere in between, you are part of our community, and we are glad you are here. If you are joining us in Zoom, the chat function will be on for much of the service. It's a great way to welcome and support one another, to affirm the hard work and effort of our worship team, and to share good vibes and positive thoughts with each other. For technical issues or constructive thoughts, please private message one of our Zoom hosts indicated with an asterisk by their names, or join us with coffee hour after this service to share them there. Thank you to our virtual greeters who are offering hospitality and tech help through the service. Additionally, on Zoom, click on the live transcript function button wherever it lives on your screen for increased accessibility. I have a few announcements about the life of our congregation. The UCM Racial Justice Group invites you to take a short survey to help inform the work of the Racial Justice Group on behalf of the church. The link is in the e-news. For next Sunday's service, we will join other UU congregations in hosting a Reproductive Justice Sunday. Please be in touch with Reverend Joan if you might be interested in sharing a poem, a reading, or a brief reflection on how issues of reproduction have affected you. Please read the weekly e-newsletter to learn more about the many upcoming events in our church community. And finally, we welcome back Elaine Ball, UCM Congregational Life Coordinator, from her time of leave. Elaine will be hosting coffee hour, and we invite you to stay on after the service for a time of conversation. Elaine, welcome back. And now, let us enter more deeply into our time of worship with our prelude.
Good morning. My name is Vertus LeVar Robinson, and I am the ministerial intern for the Unitarian Church of Montpelier. And it is a pleasure to be with you this morning. And I use he, him, or they pronouns. Our opening words are adapted from the writings of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it's from Lifting Our Voices, and it's number 149. This is where we are. Where do we go from here? First, we must massively assert our dignity and worth. We must stand up amidst a system that still oppresses and develop an unassailable and majestic sense of values. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive. And that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. And this, what we must see as we move on. Come, let us worship together. Now join us in singing our opening hymn, We Would Be One, number 318 in our gray hymnal.
Let us now light the flaming chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. We invite you to light a chalice at home if you have one nearby. We light this flame, enduring symbol of our collective commitment to lead with truth and compassion. Please join me in saying these words of affirmation, adapted from Universalist minister L. Griswold Williams. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant. Our generosity is a form of love and gratitude. Our gifts, freely given, help us to practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation. Each month, through the UCM Community Pouch, we share part of our collection with an important church fund or a community organization aligned with our values. During the month of January, our pouch recipients are Vermont Relief Collective and Salon Black Walnut. The Vermont Relief Collective is a network by and for Black and Indigenous people of color, or BIPOC, in Vermont, who are passionate about land, environment, agriculture, and food systems. RELIEF stands for racial equity in land, environment, agriculture, and food, our 4 focus areas. RELIEF has emerged as a critical resource for BIPOC in Vermont to build community and co-create a vision and strategy to support BIPOC to thrive in this state. Salon Black Walnut is a culture-building invitational residency that draws BIPOC artists from the region to perform, collaborate, share, and create in Central Vermont. Your contribution to the UCM Community Pouch this month will directly support this work. You can make a financial contribution today by contributing online. Go to ucmvt.org and click Donate to UCM. There are options to contribute to the general fund, which supports the operating budget of the church, the community pouch, or both. You can also mail a check to the church, or you can use our text to give option. Simply send a text message with the word give to 802-266-4848 and follow the instructions sent to you. We are so grateful to each and every one of you for your generosity in its many forms. While the offering is being given and gratefully received, please enjoy this wonderful musical offering, Make Them Hear You, from the musical Ragtime, sung by past and present members of the UCM choir, with the solo by Heather Mose.
Go out and tell our story, let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you, make them hear you. How justice was our battle, and how justice was denied. Make them hear you, make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, that sometimes there are battles that are more than black and white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you,
Wonderful, beautiful. We set aside time now to share with one another our joys and concerns and sorrows that we bring with us into this time of worship. You may be celebrating something special in your life that you would like to share with all of us so that we can celebrate with you. Or perhaps you're experiencing a challenge or a loss that you would like to share that we can offer our love and our support. Denise Bailey, our lay pastoral caregiver, is available this morning to lend a listening ear of care. She'll be available during coffee hour and will also put her number in the chat for an after service call. And at this time, please, we'll be able to use the raise hand function if you would like to speak. You'll out loud your joy or concern. And Danya will be spotlighting you so that we can light a candle for you here in the sanctuary. But please keep in mind that we are live streaming to Facebook, and whatever you are sharing here will be shared there as well. And again, you can use the raise hand function on Zoom to voice your joy, your concern, or your sorrow. And you can also put them in the chat so that we can offer your love, our love and support in the chat. But I just want to start by giving you a joy. And that joy is officially, I came in to this internship as an aspirant in the UU ministry. I am now a candidate. And in December, I will see the MFC, which is our credentialing body, for preliminary fellowship. And then after that, we'll be able to be ordained. And I have so many of you who guided me along the way, who helped me out with hours for my clinical hours and things of that nature, and growing so much from day one to now get to the point where I'm achieving the goals of my call. So that is a joy that I'm sharing with all of you. And I'm gonna light a candle for that. And we will light one more for all the joys and concerns and sorrows that are held in the silence of our hearts this morning. For our prayer this morning, I offer the words of Clyde Grubbs. And you can join me in a position or an atmosphere or creating that atmosphere of prayer and meditation. Have your hand over your heart, your eyes closed, whatever you feel this morning as I offer you this prayer. Source of life, we have been giving time to measure our days. What are we to make of these times in which we live and love and have our being? The road of history has been long, full of both hope and disappointment. There have been wars and rumors of wars, violence and exploitation, hunger and homelessness and destruction. We know that we cannot continue to live in the old way. We must make a change, seek a new way, a way leading toward peace with justice and a healthy planet. Creative Spirit, you have been given a vision for the good, and we yearn for a new way. But where are we to find the courage to begin the work for this new beginning? we wonder what is required of us. We think of the prophets, women and men who gave voice to unpopular opinion, who made personal sacrifices, sometimes their lives, for the sake of justice. May we be inspired and renewed by the courage of these witnesses, and let them empower us as we work for this vision. So may it be. Ashe and amen. Now please join me in a brief moment of quiet meditation, after which we will sing together, Spirit of Life. Our reading comes from a speech given before the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. on May the 17th, 1957. The speech was by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., called "Give Us the Ballot, We Will Transform the South." And he is making reference to the Supreme Court decision in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. He said, 3 years ago, the Supreme Court of this nation rendered in simple, eloquent, and unequivocal language a decision which will long be stenciled on the mental sheets of succeeding generations. For all men of goodwill, this May 17th decision came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of segregation. It came as just a great beacon of light, of hope to millions of distinguished people throughout the world who had dared only to dream of freedom. It came as a legal and sociological death blow to the old Plessy doctrine of separate but equal. It came as a reaffirmation of the good old American doctrine of freedom and equality for all people. Unfortunately, This noble and sublime decision has not gone without opposition. This opposition has often risen to ominous proportions. Many states have risen up in open defiance. The legislative halls of the South ring loud with such words as introposition and nullification. Methods of defiance range from crippling economic reprisals to the tragic reign of violence and terror. All of these forces have conjoined to make for massive resistance. But evermore, even more, all types of conniving methods are still being used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. The denial of the sacred right is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic traditions and its democracy turned upside down. So long as I do formally and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself. I cannot make up my mind. It is made up for me. I cannot live as a democratic citizen observing the laws I have helped to enact. I can only submit to the edict of others. So our most urgent request to the President of the United States and every member of Congress is to give us the right to vote. Give us the ballot. We will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer plead to the federal government for passage of an anti-lynching law. We will, by the power of our vote, write the law on the statute books of the southern states and bring an end to the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence. Give us the ballot, and we will transform the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs and calculated good deeds of orderly citizens. Give us the ballot, and we will fill our legislative halls with men of goodwill and send to the sacred halls of congressmen who will not sign a Southern manifesto because of their devotion to the manifesto of justice. Give us the ballot, and we will place judges on the benches of the South who will do justly and love mercy. And we will place at the head of the Southern states governors who have felt not only the tang of the human, but the glow of the divine. Give us the ballot, and we will quietly and non-violently, without rancor or bitterness, implement the Supreme Court decision of May 17th, 1954. In her book, Our Time Is Now, Stacey Abrams shares the story of the momentous occasion when her grandmother, Lily Bell, went to vote for the first time in 1968. This was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And though the Voting Rights Act had passed in 1965, it took another 3 years until its full implementation was complete, and the right to vote became a reality for African Americans in their town. Grandma Bell sat in her room as everyone else in the house who was old enough to bustle about preparing to head out the door. Her husband, Jim, finally came to find her as she sat on her bed to ask, what's the matter? As she recounted to her granddaughter, she was scared. She feared what might happen when she, an African-American woman, showed up at the polling place. I'm afraid, Jim. I'm afraid of the dogs, the police. I don't want to vote. she said. Her husband was angry, reminded her of her children, of their children, and other Black children who had fought so hard for their rights. She mustered up her courage, gathered her purse and her coat, and told her husband she was ready to go. They traveled to the voting precinct together to cast their very first ballots. For decades, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 ensured that electoral practices at the state level could not be discriminatory. However, since then, many efforts and measures undermine that victory. That fear that she felt, but being able to vote was being walked back. These efforts were intentional and even went against the hope that Lincoln even spoke to when thousands of American siblings were lost in the Civil War and fighting a civil war, fighting for a new birth of freedom, that a government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. These efforts were thought to be of the people and for the people, but they were definitely not by the people. For when representatives and ballot measures are elected and passed without the majority of people voting, how can it truly be by the people? How do we have a democracy that is not just of and for the people, but by the people? You know, it takes me back to when I was a new professor teaching for the first time history and African American studies back in Rochester, New York. Shout out to any Rochesterians on Zoom today. But I was a community college professor. So I was teaching 5 or 6 classes a semester and gained some popularity. So most of my classes were full. So around 200 students a semester. I was 30 years old. I know I'm dating myself, but I was 30 years old and it was 2008. And I was not a registered voter. Why? A college professor who taught history and African American studies and was not a registered voter? I mean, every semester I taught the origins of democracy from ancient Greece all the way up to the March on Selma and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But as a Black man in this country, my vote didn't matter. Or so I was made to believe. My voice didn't matter, or so I was made to believe. But in 2008, remember 2008? Anybody remember 2008? A Black president in my lifetime? I started to believe that in this election, maybe I did have a vote, and maybe I did have a voice. I soon really realized that I was not the only one. For the majority of my students, 200 of them, but predominantly people of color and poor people, I was in a community college. It was the same case. They believed that their voice and their vote didn't matter. So one of my students, who was 56 years old, it was the case for him. For he had spent the majority of his adult life incarcerated. And when we came down to it, he realized, wait a minute, I thought, because I've been told that because I had served time, even though I'm off the books, I'm out of parole, that my voice and my vote don't matter. I'm not truly a citizen. But we discovered through research and digging in that, wait a minute, you're off the books. You are eligible. And all of my students, mostly of my students, voted in that election. We had all kinds of things on campus. We had a Rock the Vote event. We brought in some of the mayor. We brought in all these people, and we were celebrating for the first time that the majority of us were going to vote for the first time, including myself as a 30-year-old college professor. And I voted. And I will never forget at 11 o'clock that evening, when they had announced that Barack Obama was the president-elect of the United States, tears just poured through my eyes because, again, I told you I was an African-American studies professor, and the next day I was going to teach. I was going to say preach, but I was teaching back then. I was preaching too. I was going to teach about how in slave plantations, enslaved women were assaulted and abused by their slave masters. I was also going to teach in another class how in 1892, the majority, like about over 3,000, almost 3,000 people were lynched, predominantly people of color, and no one was ever brought to justice. I was going to teach those two lessons the very next day. Tears poured out of my eyes uncontrollably. I had no idea I was going to react that way because for the first time I had participated. And for the first time I felt that my vote mattered or my voice mattered. And the next day, all of us came in that classroom. I had abandoned my lectures and I had an American flag and I felt proud to be an American. I felt proud to be Black. For the first time in my life. Now, mind you, that 56-year-old student, he had written about because he voted too, and he had written about his experience. And his English was not so great, so he went to the Learning Center and they had helped him. And they were so moved by what he had written that they had sent it into the newspaper and it got published and they showed me and I was a mess because I could not believe the power that he had, 56 years old, voting for the first time, being published and reaching, I don't know how many people and inspiring them, because what he said was all of his life, he had been numb. He had felt nothing. Even when he was incarcerated, nothing. He said in this little reflection paper that he wrote for my class that he was a year clean from crack. And he voted for the first time. And when he came out of that booth, a tear came out of his eye. I showed him that he was published. I wasn't even published then. And then he broke down because he realized the power that he had, the power not of just voting, but the power that we had. This is a sacred power that we have. And not soon after that, in 2013, rolled around, and the US Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder negated the core mechanism of Voting Rights Act for preventing voter suppression. Some have alleged that the ruling made it easier for state officials to make it harder for ethnic minority voters to vote in states like Alabama, Arizona, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Texas, Wisconsin, and these are just examples. There are so much more since then that have come to suppress the vote. The right to vote for millions of Americans are in jeopardy due to the years of state and county level legislation and policies that have chipped away at ease of voter registration, access to the ballot and polling places, and the integrity of ballot counting. You know, when I was a national leader in electoral engagement in higher ed, I worked with organizations such as Student Learn, Student Vote Coalition, Campus Vote Project, the Andrew Goodman Foundation, All In Campus Democracy Challenge, working hard to overturn such efforts to suppress and discourage student voters. And the efforts of are tireless and still ongoing. You know, more than just simply a civic act, I believe, and I'm not alone in this, that voting is a profoundly spiritual act. Martin Luther King said, the denial of this sacred right is tragic, is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic traditions, and it is democracy turned upside down, so long as I do not firmly and irrevocably possess the right to vote, I do not possess myself. Desmond Tutu also spoke of this and what it meant to him to vote for the first time at the age of 63 in South Africa. It was a religious act, he said. It was a spiritual experience because you walked into the polling booth, one person, with all of the history of oppression and injustice and all the baggage that we are carrying. And you walk and you make your mark and you put the ballot in to the box and you emerge on the other side. You are a different person. You are transfigured. Now you can actually count in your own country. You see, voter suppression laws take away something even more fundamental and much more spiritually significant than the ability to cast a ballot. Voter suppression laws are designed to take away the belief in our own power. These laws are meant to make everyday people suspicious and fearful that none of it matters anyway, like I believed when I was 30, up until I was 30, or that the attempt to excuse the right to vote will result in an unendurable frustration, or worse, intimidation and aggression in the voting process. To defend the right to vote, then, is to defend our own power, to defend our agency, and to defend the dignity that comes from enacting one's agency and self-determination. Remember what Martin Luther King said at the beginning of our service? That what is needed is the realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. So power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Theologian Kelly Brown Douglas speaks of a reverse of the golden rule. Do not withhold from others what you would not withheld from yourself. Again, do not withhold from others what you would not have withheld from yourself. Would any of us want the sacred right to vote withheld or taken away? Well, if it's withheld and taken away from some of us, it is withheld and taken away from all of us. If we believe as universalists in collective salvation, if we believe in shared salvation, if we believe in the interconnected web of existence that we are all a part of, then our sacred right to vote is being withheld and taken away right now. It is happening under the guise that it is of all the people and for all the people, but we know that it is not by all the people because it is not with all the people. In order for it to be by the people, it must first be with the people, which speaks of a collective effort, which speaks of a shared effort, which speaks of true inclusivity, not exclusivity, which speaks of a true democracy that we want and not the democracy we have that continues to exclude, suppress, and deny. So what can we do? Here is a message from Dr. Bernice A. King, daughter of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I want to take this moment to clear up any confusion that some of you may have as a result of a recent headline in the news suggesting that the King family will not be celebrating the King holiday if no voting rights legislation has been passed. Well, the issue is really not will we be celebrating, but how we will be celebrating, or more appropriately, commemorating the King holiday. So let me be clear from the outset that we will be commemorating the King holiday, and we are encouraging all of you to continue your commemorations as well. However, if voting rights is still hanging in the balance by the King holiday on January 17th, 2022, then we, meaning all of us, must collectively use our various commemorations and our platforms on that particular day to do what Dr. King would do. My father would speak and act in a way to ensure that this nation lives up to its promise of democracy by putting pressure on our United States Senate to bypass the filibuster, and instead of taking the King holiday off, they should make it a day on to pass the Voting Rights Act.
So Unitarian Universalists around the country have been taking action and calling on our members of Congress, especially our senators, to do whatever it takes to pass this voting rights legislation. And during coffee hour, you can hang out with us and we can do this together. And there's a link that we can go to, and that link will be provided in the chat now. But you can also do this during coffee hour, and it will link you directly to the phones of the senators. We are thankful that our Vermont senators have been champions of voting rights legislation that has been on the docket in the US Congress. And let's let them know that we are with them and putting democracy first and not hiding behind archaic rules that have been used to uphold racist policies. So on this Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, let us remember the spirit of love and life that fueled that movement. Let us conjure that same spirit of love and life now, in this time and in this place. Let us link arms, forming a chain of love and life that cannot be broken. And let us live our principles, let us live our values, and let us live our love. May it be so. And now join us in singing our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from
Jesus hide us. Hope inside us will lead the way. Love that song. Let us take that with us as we draw our service to a close. And when we do that, we will extinguish our chalice and carry within each of us its healing flame, the warmth of community, the spark of hope into the days and the week ahead. And now please join in saying our congregational mission statement. We welcome all as we build a loving community to nurture each person's spiritual journey, serve human need, and protect the earth, our home. And our closing words come from the Reverend William G. Singford, one of my mentors and UU elders. Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is so much work to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us to hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for the constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream. Amen and ashe. Now our postlude is once to every soul and nation. It's number 119 in our great hymnal, and Eliza will be playing it on the piano. But the words come from James Russell Lowell, who wrote these words to protest the Mexican-American War, as it would have extended slavery and to more slaveholding states. And the words are, once to every soul and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good and evil side, then to stand with truth is noble when we share its wretched crust. Error that bring flame and profit, and 'tis prosperous to be just. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis true alone is strong. Though its portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong, then it is the brave ones chooses, while the coward stands aside, till the multitude make virtue of the faith they have denied. Be well, everyone, and blessed be.